All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something that really challenges how we define understanding itself. We're looking at a fascinating set of sources that explore what happens when analysis stops being about, explanation and starts becoming about generation.
And this is so important because it gets right to the heart of that discomfort people feel, that sense of mismatch.
Oh, yeah.
You've been there, right? Where all the data points are lined up, the logic is sound, but you just have this feeling that it's not touching the real truth of the matter.
Absolutely. The sources talk about those exact moments. The explanation is technically correct, but it doesn't touch the essence.
Right. The causes are all there, the information seems complete, but something crucial, it just doesn't activate.
So that solid, straight line of cause and effect that we rely on?
It fails. It feels like that reliable line suddenly just unravels. It becomes more like a complex vibration.
How vibration.
And when that happens, you lose the sequence. You lose that simple A leads to B logic.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if that straight line of causality is gone, we need a completely different framework, a new set of ethics for how we analyze things.
We do. And the sources really synthesize two very different approaches. Let's start with the one we know, the linear one.
The comfortable one.
The comfortable one, exactly. Linear analysis is the bedrock of, scientific certainty. It assumes there's a sequence, a forward movement.
A to B to C.
A to B to C.
Mm-hmm.
And its ethics are all based on the transparency of causality. The main requirement is just correct measurement.
So you have to define the cause, show your evidence, make sure it's reproducible.
Precisely. And we need that structure. It gives us institutional certainty from engineering to law.
Right, that makes perfect sense. We demand proof. If you can't prove that A led to B, the whole analysis is considered a failure.
But then you have nonlinear analysis.
Yeah.
And it operates under a totally different contract.
Because that guarantee of sequence is gone.
It's gone. Everything is interconnected. It's vibrating. So the ethics have to shift completely. You can't demand transparency of the cause anymore.
So what do you demand?
You demand transparency of the observation.
Whoa, hang on. That's a huge philosophical pivot. So if causality is a web and it's ambiguous, the focus shifts from the thing being analyzed onto the analyst.
Exactly. The ethical requirement is no longer just about accuracy. It's about your stance. You have to reveal where you're looking from, which relationships you're choosing to prioritize, and how much you're intervening in the system.
The analyst isn't a neutral party anymore.
They're part of the meaning that's emerging.
So we're talking about posture transparency over pure accuracy. We stop asking, is your data correct? And we start asking, how are you seeing this and why are you standing there?
Yes. The ethical subject becomes the observer, not the spreadsheet.
Okay, let's ground this a little. How does this actually show up in the real world?
Well, the sources bring up this idea of rationality without explanation. Think about huge, complex decisions, a massive corporate merger, or even a deeply personal choice.
I'm immediately thinking of those moments. Deciding to move across the country, maybe, or backing a new technology that hasn't proven itself. It just feels right,
Yeah.
but you can't really justify it linearly to someone who's skeptical.
Exactly that. And our sources argue this isn't just, gut feeling or blind luck. They call it a rational phenomenon that's guided by the relational gradient.
The relational gradient. Okay.
Imagine a landscape where all the relationships between people, money, timing, they create this invisible gravitational field. That field has a gradient, a kind of pull towards a certain outcome, even if you can't articulate every single cause and effect step.
That's a powerful metaphor. The structure is working, it's functional, even if the written report explaining it is, well, insufficient.
It is. The logic is in the field, not the line.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because this isn't just a human thing. This is at the core of our most advanced technologies.
That's right. When you look at how, say, an advanced AI model works, specifically its attention mechanism, it's fundamentally nonlinear. It doesn't follow a rigid A to B to C chain of thought.
No, it seems to use what the sources call a wave-like distribution to figure out what's important. It looks at the entire field of data at once and weights things based on resonance, not just sequence.
And that's why you need a dual viewpoint to handle AI analysis. You need the linear checks for accountability and fairness, of course. But you absolutely need the nonlinear understanding to actually grasp the patterns it's seeing and to trust the output.
And this ties right back to that ethical shift we were talking about. The linear era was all about an accurate explanation of what happened in the past.
Right.
But the nonlinear era values the transparency of your stance in the present. If an AI gives you an answer that seems to come out of nowhere, trusting it means trusting the posture of the algorithm, the relationships it prioritized, not just the raw data it ate.
It completely redefines trust.
It does.
And this brings us to the central idea, the real phase jump. Analysis as generation.
Okay.
When you have both linear precision, your accurate measurements, and nonlinear transparency, your clear observational posture, when those two overlap, analysis stops being an explanation of the past,
It becomes...
an active generation for the future.
Wait, are you saying the analysis actually creates the outcome?
In a sense, yes. The synthesis in the sources is profound here. Analysis is no longer just a technique for sorting historical causes.
It's what?
It becomes the act of the observer tuning their relationship with the world. By choosing your posture, by deciding how you're going to observe, you are influencing what meaning is allowed to emerge.
That explains that initial discomfort we talked about, that feeling of understanding something before you can explain it.
Yes, it's because it functions as a resonant structure. The observer and the system are, for a moment, tuned to the same frequency.
You're not forcing an explanation out of it. You're listening.
You're listening to what wants to emerge. And the sources say this emergence, this generation, can happen in two ways.
Okay.
The first type is generation driven by collision. Think rapid, forced change. High pain, high heat. You smash the system to get an answer, but the shockwaves, the rebound, is intense. A market crash that forces a restructure, for example.
Right. It's brutal.
It is. But the second type is generation driven by inquiry. This is more about continuous change. It minimizes the interference, and it minimizes the pain. It's about holding a receptive posture.
And the sources say that the inquiry-driven path is what keeps the field open, right? The ethical task then becomes tuning your observational posture to maintain what they call an inquiry gradient.
That's a great way to put it. It's like climbing an intellectual hill. If the gradient is too steep, you crash. That's collision. Yeah. But if you tune your posture and maintain that gentle, steady ascent, that's inquiry. The generation just continues.
So we're moving from a technique that explains what happened to one that listens to how relationships emerge.
Yes. Our analysis becomes an act of intentional, ethical listening.
That is a really powerful reframing of what knowledge is. We've seen how the definition of analysis is shifting, demanding this new ethical stance where clarity of observation is more important than causal certainty.
And what's truly fascinating is where the sources locate the ultimate foundation for all of this. It's in the observational environment itself.
Meaning what?
Meaning the things we usually ignore. Silence, breath, trust, shared intention. These are the invisible instruments that actually sustain inquiry and allow for this kind of perception.
So what does this all mean? If we really make this shift, the entire landscape of knowledge just changes. If analysis isn't just explanation, but the generation of relationships, then what are we actually doing when we try to understand anything complex?
And understanding is born, we know that. But if it doesn't follow a straight line, at what precise moment does it truly emerge? Right. I think the most profound question the sources leave us with is this. What structures will we find standing in that subtle space, that boundary, that between noderness that exists between the linear explanation we want and the nonlinear resonance we feel?
Because that space
That space is where the future of knowledge resides.